That's tough, following the John Lewis Christmas campaign.
Hello, Bournemouth.
There you go. That's you.
Oh, shall I click?
Yeah,
what you might have noticed from the introduction so far is that neither of us make a living from writing. So, in that sense, we may well be a disappointment to you. I make a living from strategising at Mediacom. Catherine runs Pearl and Dean, the best cinema company in the world. And although I write every week in Campaign, it's because I've got more opinions than I know what to do with, and that's a good way of getting rid of them. We have just had this book published, The Glass Wall: Success Strategies for Women in Work and Businesses That Mean Business, available now at all good bookshops and on Amazon.com. But what we're going to talk about is how we wrote it, why we wrote it, and the process of writing it. And if we'll tell you that story, and of hope that that's useful to you. That's a picture of us on our submarine.
You can tell it's a campaign picture because both of us look deeply uncomfortable. And I seem to be attempting some kind of split manoeuvre up some stairs because Colin Stout from Campaign never takes a photograph where you might be comfortable or look like you're having a good time. You genuinely do have to look like... I look like I'm just kind of hanging on, actually. Sue's trying to save me.
I, on the other hand, love it because it makes me look tall.
Yeah.
Which is a rare occurrence. Okay. No, my numbers have disappeared again. Right. The reason why we wrote this book is because of the numbers that are supposed to be in these circles. But you can work them out, can't you, from the pie charts?
Yeah. It's a multiple choice question we're going to ask you, and then you have to name it, and then anybody who gets it wrong has to leave.
They say, of course, 26%, 10%, and 51%. And the reason that they say those numbers and the reason why we wrote this book is that the Davis report came out last autumn, about a year ago actually, and said, good news everyone, said the report written by Lord Davis, a middle-aged man with a background in government and banking, who'd been asked to do a report about gender parity on UK boards. Good news, he said, FTSE 100 now has 26% representation by women. Well, okay, first of all, 26% is not 50%, but, they'd set a target of 25%. Well done them. Except that when you dug into the figures, 26% included non-executive directors, which is great and fabulous, and that's women who don't actually work for the company in question. They turn up for an afternoon every quarter and get paid lots of money for it, and I'm sure benefit the board very much. But when you dig into the report a bit further and you say how many executive women are there on UK FTSE 100 boards, the figure is actually 9.6%, right, which is less to celebrate. And just remind me again, Catherine, what's the population of women in this country?
I think it'll be about 50%, Sue, so basically that's a bit shit, really, isn't it? Or either that or only a fifth of us are any good at, 20% of us are only any good at holding down a proper job, as opposed to turning up, taking money and eating cake.
Now, does that matter? Apart from to women who would like to be on boards, does that matter in the scheme of things? There is piece of research after piece of research after piece of research done by good, reputable companies like Grant Thornton, like McKinsey, like Accenture, that says that if you look at it from a quantitative basis, there are huge amounts of money and increased profitability that are generated by boards that have a better gender parity on them. And this very large number here, 28 trillion, that's the amount of money that McKinsey reckon that the global economy would benefit by if women fulfilled their potential worldwide by 2025. So it's a very, very
There was another
big
really
number.
depressing statistic that came out this week from Deloitte that said that it's going to take another half century for women to achieve equal pay, which is just ridiculous and very cross-making.
And, because that's a very big number, there's another number which is, I can wrap my brain around a bit more, which is Grant Thornton research from this year that said that listed boards in the UK, the US and India, where they have a representation of women, outperform the other listed boards by 655 billion. So lots of big numbers, lots of reasons to sort boards out. But... Catherine?
Well, according to a piece of research, many women don't want to reach the top, so there's only 41% of them of 200 success. And I think that's utter bollocks. I've never met a woman who's gone, actually, I don't want to be successful. I'd really like to be quite crap and average and not earn as much money and just genuinely be treated like dirt by people. So it's just, I mean, there's just this series of rules. And I think actually what it is quite a lot of women look up. I mean, the reason why we called it the glass wall rather than the glass ceiling is because I think a lot of women look up and go, actually, you've got to be, blow-dried, made up, reach this level of perfection to be in the C-suite that quite a lot of men don't feel that they have to reach. I mean, I've never known anybody. If you ever read anything about Marissa Mayer or Sheryl Sandberg or any really successful women, you notice it was quite a lot about their hair. She's got really great hair. You've got to have really great hair. It's the reason why I will never be in run a public listing company, because I've got really bad hair that sticks out.
She's got lovely hair.
But, I like it, and I'm stuck with it. But, it's this really, really weird thing, and I think quite a lot of women look up and go, actually, I don't want to do that. It's not that they lack the ambition, it's because, A, it looks really difficult to get there, and B, there's this really, really unrealistic standard that we hold women to. And as long as they're in a minority, that will persist, because everyone will feel they have to live to that particular role.
So that's where the idea of the book came from. And partly also it was because I was sitting at MediaCom at the time that all of this stuff was going through my mind. And at the time at MediaCom, which is the most successful media company in the UK, so we count ourselves by our clients' billings, we bill in excess of 1.2 billion. And at the time of writing, my most senior people in the company, 4 out of the 5 most senior client-facing people were women. And 3 out of the 4 of those most senior client-facing women worked part-time because they had children at home. And I think if you went to most boards, global boards, and you said, what we'll do is it's the most competitive sector in advertising in the UK, creative agencies aside, the most competitive sector in the UK. This is the biggest company in the sector, and it comes under pressure, 24/7, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year from clients pitching for its business. What we think we'll do is we'll have 4 out of the 5 most top people as women, and 3 out of the 4 of those women will be working part-time. That's fine, isn't it? And frankly, most businesses would go, that's a nice idea, Sue, but you're having a laugh. It had happened at MediaCom. It happened in MediaCom because MediaCom happens to be a meritocracy. It is not possible, I said to myself, arrogant as I like to be about the quality of talent at MediaCom, it's not possible that it just so happens that all the talented women in advertising happen to have ended up at MediaCom, and therefore that's why they've risen to the top in such numbers. And I should say now have continued to. We've got a succession, and although my CEO now is Josh, our ex-CEO is now our chair, and there's a steady stream of women in succession. It's not possible that they just all happen to have ended up working at MediaCom. There must be very successful, very good women out there in every other company and in every law firm and in every sort of stream of politics in the UK who are not getting through. And why they're not getting through, as Catherine said, when I went to talk to her and say, will you please write this book with me? It's not because there's a glass ceiling, because the glass ceiling was sort of abolished kind of 30 years ago. 30 years ago, there was a woman prime minister, as there is now, and the women were going to come through. I mean, when Catherine and I started out, we sort of both thought, yeah, there's only a few women bosses, but that's going to change soon. You're going to see every other boss in a dress occasionally, and not because they're cross-dressing, but because they're dressing appropriately. Although why there's not more cross-dressing in that direction, I don't know. It's another talk.
Maybe that's our next book. Why is there not more cross-dressing in business?
So we came up with this idea of the glass wall, and we set out to write the book, not to make money, not to make ourselves famous, because we're both very ambivalent about that sort of thing, but to set something straight, because businesses are missing out, women are getting frustrated, want to do something about it.
I think the other thing as well, though, is there's quite a lot of talk about it. So diversity is a really, really big thing. But actually, when you talk to people, there's lots of policies, but not many people are living it. And I think it's the thing about holding the mirror up and saying that, there are practical things that you can do to ensure that you get your fair share of careers, and also to help bosses, because it's quite difficult if you've come up seamlessly and have never encountered any sexism because you're a bloke, to kind of turn around and go, yeah, but we've got a maternity policy and we've got this, and they're still not coming through. And quite a lot of it is unconscious bias. and because it's unconscious, they don't know it's there. The interesting thing about having a book idea is that you have a book idea and then you write your sample chapters, and then we got an agent, and he was very nice, and we didn't really know what we were doing, which is quite unusual, for us. It's a very opaque world. And we went to some places and they kept saying, is it like Lean In? It's like, no, it's not like Lean In. Basically, because
it's not like chuffing Lean In.
It's not like
Catherine's
chuffing Lean In, as I got. Yes,
this.
It's not like Lean In, and it's a bit like when you get the Great British Bake Off, and then the Great British Sewing Bee, and then you get the X Factor, and then you get The Voice. It's like we'd like that, but a little bit different. And the problem about that is that there's already been one. So why would you write a paler? And in my case, less hair authenticated version of, Lean In, because you just wouldn't. And so it was really difficult to try and explain to it, to go. And we had one publisher who said, yeah, I know it's all about women, but it'd be a really good idea if it was a bit more about men. Well, that isn't the bloody premise of the book, is it? So it's just really, really weird. It's like having this creative idea and someone going, I really, really love it, except all of it's wrong, which, is slightly bizarre.
And this time last year, we had been fired by our book agent. So we got fired by our book agent on September the 3rd. Although Catherine likes to say, but basically what happened was that I said to Catherine, because it had all gone quiet for a bit and we'd written lots more of the book, and I said to Catherine, do you think he's doing anything? Or do you think he's given up on us and is just being polite? Or do you think this is how long it takes? And Catherine said, I'll write him a stern email. And basically, by return of stern email, he said, I think you guys are better self-published. You've got no chance. Yeah. And on October...
Yeah, I'm never going to write a stern email again. I'll just write really nice emails. Future.
And October the 3rd, we were actually signed by our lovely, brilliant publishers, Profile Books, to whom we owe an awful lot, because they've been absolutely brilliant. They got the book. Claire Grace Taylor got the book. We actually didn't tell her till the book launch that we'd been fired by the book agent. But as you can imagine, I was, in quite a down and quite upset. But what I'd been doing is I'd been talking, and Catherine had been talking to everybody that we knew about the idea of the book. And what you'll find is that most writers are incredibly selfish, is a good word. I'm trying to think of a nicer one. As in, you've got a publisher, could you introduce me to them? And they kind of go, no, because they're my publisher. They're not. And I actually just happened to meet someone who was a friend of someone who just had a book published by Profile, who said to me, absolutely, I think Claire will love this, introduced us, and they snapped us up, I have to say, and we're really delighted. All these people are up here because while we were waiting to be signed, we got on with interviews for the book and writing for the book. And we interviewed over 100 people up and down the country, in and outside the UK, men, women.
Not all in advertising, in the real world, as my son calls it.
We were very surprised at what people said to us, and we've ended up with every single case study in the book being anonymous. In some cases, we were asked, it's not enough for you to change my name, could you change my profession? And by the way, could you change the country that you're saying that I'm from? Which we did. So everything. Only Catherine and I know who these people are.
Yeah, and I have real trouble remembering what we changed their names to. So whenever I tell a story, I just go a woman or somebody, because I'm really worried I'm going to out people inadvertently.
Say the wrong name.
It's a good job I never joined MI6, isn't it? I would have been blabbing.
And then because I do knock out a weekly blog for Campaign, which they kindly publish, I'm used to writing 500 to 600 words at a go. And so the whole process of writing the book, we didn't think we've got 80,000 words to write. The whole thing was in the planning, and it was therefore 80,000 words. We thought we'd have 7 or 8 chapters. We therefore thought that we'd have 6 or 7 case studies per chapter. We therefore never thought about more than 1,500 words of writing at a time, which I did on Sunday afternoons and Thursday evenings. I don't know when you did your...
I got up at 5:30 in the morning.
There we go. Before she had breakfast. Yeah. So if you do happen to read it and you notice that any of the writing seems quite hungry and needs a cup of coffee...
That'll be me.
That'll be Catherine's bit. Mine will be I'm a bit slow slumped on Sunday afternoon after Sunday lunch. So we're just going to talk you through some of the stories and then tell you how we structured them. So this is one of the stories. This is Peter. Peter we tried to make it very human, very friendly. We tried to get lots of shared experiences. And this is Peter. Peter is sort of 3-ish, and he's just going on his first Easter egg hunt. And this is a story as told to me by a woman that I'm calling Jane. That is not her name, but I'm calling her Jane. And she was telling me about how her and her friends always went on an annual Easter egg hunt. It became a bit of an institution. They found a beautiful bluebell wood. They would go off and they would, the dads would hide the little Easter eggs, little Easter eggs, little lint bunnies, the little ones, and they'd hide them in the woods. And then the older children, there was a set of 3 families, a set of older children ages ranged from sort of 13 to 3, and all the rest of them happened to be girls. There happened to only be one little boy called Peter. And the older girls would look after the younger children, and they'd find all the Easter eggs, how exciting, and they'd bring them all back to where the parents were all sitting, and then they'd share them out, and it would all be lovely, except for this year that Jane was telling me about. And in this year that Jane was telling me about, Peter, the little boy, arrived back in the circle very early on, long before anybody else came back, and he jumped into the middle of the circle of parents, and he said, "I've won! I've won, Mummy! I've won, Daddy!" And all the other parents are sort of looking around thinking, well, no one's ever won before. What? And he holds up a little gold Easter egg, not an Easter egg, the lint bunny, and he goes, "I've won because I've found the gold bunny." And the other parents are sort of thinking, especially the other mums, they're sort of thinking, well, there's more than what, Peter, there's more than one bunny, and it's not a competition, and it's, And his dad says, Peter's dad says to him, remember he's the only little boy, Peter's dad said to him, "Yeah, Peter, you've won. You've beaten the girls. Well done, you." Right, and there's this sort of moment. Yes, there's a grimace there. And the other mothers are sort of thinking, well, I'd quite like to say to Peter, quite frankly, nobody's won at this ever before. It's been going on for 10 years. And she said this made her think about how little boys are different from little girls. It made her think about how we bring them up differently. And then it made her think about how in her very serious profession, she works as a consultant in health services, this behaviour still goes on. And she said it made me realise that when my boss passes me in the corridor and I know how busy he is, he will say to me, "Jane, is everything all right?" And I will say back, "Absolutely, don't worry about a thing, everything's fine." And he'll pass on, because I don't want to upset him, because he's very busy. And she said, and after thinking about this, she said, made me realise that when he passes one of my colleagues and says to him, "How's everything going?" I know he's saying, "It's all fine. There was a huge crisis, but I saved the day. Don't worry about a thing." And she said, is it any wonder then that when it comes to promotion, he's going to think about him, not about me? And this is something that women seem to do. There seems to be a gender divide. And it's important to say that it's a spectrum. So, of course, there are many, the problems we're talking about are sort of toxic alpha male, sort of showy offiness that's bad for business and bad for all sorts of people, whether they are men or women. But it does seem, from our research and our conversations, that women are more prone to this than men. And certainly I've got a woman in my office who I know would do anything for MediaCom. She runs a huge team, huge, very profitable team. She will work weekends. She will work all night. She will cover her team's work. She will do anything other than spend time telling her boss what a good job, who's responsible for her promotion, responsible for her bonus, tell her immediate boss how good she is at the job. And it's quite extraordinary because she just finds it so difficult. So we wrote up this case study, and what we've done in every case is we've written in then advice for the woman in the situation, but also advice for the management in that situation, which we think is a unique twist on a book of this kind, and what they should be doing about it. And of course, in this case, she needs to show off a bit. But quite frankly, if you're managing a set of people and you're relying on the noisiest one to tell you how brilliant he is and ignoring the quiet work that other people are getting on with, then you're not running your business properly. So that's one of the stories.
This story is about a woman, because I can't remember anybody's name, who gets promoted. 2 male colleagues all at the same level. She gets promoted, everything's all okay, except that she starts to notice that there's emails she's not on, and they have a regular meeting with their superior. And the boys all say, oh yeah, we talked about that, and we think we should do this. And if she says, but, and she thinks, I can't say that because then I look like I'm not playing my part and I should really be part of the team. And this behaviour persists until she gets really, really angry one day. And she works out that where they're doing their plotting is they go to the loo together. Yes, it's not just girls in nightclubs who go to loo together. Men who work together and who want to have kind of secret conversations do it. She got so cross that she went in and just pushed the door open in the gents and said, I'm going to stand here and listen to what you say until you start including me in your conversations because I'm so pissed off with this. And of course there are people walking past because it's a busy office and she's standing there, you know, in the urinals. She wasn't actually watching them do anything. She'd checked that out beforehand. But she stood there and said, I'm going to keep on doing this until you include me as part of your conversations because I'm not going to be pushed out. And it's a humorous way of talking about anger. Women are very, very ambivalent about anger. Women are scared to get cross because quite often our voices go a bit squeaky, or we go red, or we cry. And I actually think that anger is a fuel that you can use if you direct it properly. But it's really hard to write about anger in a way whereby you either don't come as a strident harridan or hysterical. And this is an amusing way. And it worked. I mean, the reason why they were kind of co-opting off was because one of the guys had wanted one of his team to be promoted and not this woman. And so basically there was a kind of subtle undermining going on, and it just stopped from that day on because she'd proved that she'd do whatever was necessary to be part of the conversation. But it took a while, and it is that thing, that slow burn of anger. And so we then turned it around and said, you know, you've got to be careful when you're in a meeting with people, if you're a boss, to go, hang on a minute, they're all talking and she never talks and she doesn't look like, or he doesn't look like he's part of it. You know, make sure your style of management, if you're asking for feedback, is inclusive. And for women, it's about don't be afraid of being angry, but, you know, obviously don't get to the point where you know, become hysterical or stab someone.
And we're also trying to do something that everybody gets. And this is about language, but it also happens to be about perhaps one of the biggest divides in the office. Just show of hands, who here knows who this set of chaps are? Okay. So it's mainly men that are putting their hands up, a couple of women. It is the Dutch total football team from the 1970s. Until I was told this story, I had no idea who they were.
But I noticed Sue is wearing the same colour as them.
Yeah.
So obviously we were going to be playing Keepy Uppy on the way back up to London.
Obviously. And what I noticed from the hands that were going up, this isn't a generation thing. It's not that you needed to be 15 and a football fan in the 1970s to know who the Dutch total football team of the 1970s were. They're kind of a bit iconic, a bit legendary. And the reason that I learnt about them is this story. So this is about Sarah and Jim. Sarah used to work alongside Jim, and then he got promoted over to her. She was very happy about that. She was a big fan of Jim's, but there was a bit of awkwardness in their relationship now because they've got a new, you know, he's essentially become, you know, the MD. He's like now her boss. They used to work side by side. She's not planning on leaving or anything, but it's a little bit difficult, maybe more so for him than for her. Anyway, there was it is about an agency, and it was kind of like, it was one of the classic things that anyone who's involved in an agency will recognise. The planning department weren't getting on so well with the executional department, and the executional department were blaming the planners. The brief wasn't right, and the planners were blaming the executors, saying, you know, they're just giving us back rubbish. And nobody was getting anywhere. And Sarah was just sort of had to think about this. She was a bit fed up with it. She was the head of planning. She came up with an idea. She went to Jim and she said, I've come up with this idea. I think we should do a role reversal course. I think we should get the planners to do the executor's job for one day, and vice versa, executor to the planner's job. It'll work really well. And Jim, who's just taken on this new role of managing director, looks at her and he goes, I can swear in this environment, can't I? Because this is, yeah.
I've already said chuffing, I know, for heaven's sake. I mean, I've really pushed the boundaries.
Yeah. Basically, he's a big looming man, this bloke. And he looms up and he goes, that's a terrible idea. He goes, in fact, that's a really fucking stupid idea. Sarah, let me tell you why it's such a fucking stupid idea. Because I want them to fucking focus, right? I don't want the planners thinking about what the executors... The last thing I want is for them to think about what each other's doing. I want them to fucking focus and get on with the job, right? And she went, OK, thanks for the feedback. And goes outside the office. And look, there's a number of things that she could have done. I don't know, listening to which one of these you would relate to most of. She could have gone back to her desk and gone, yes, it was a stupid idea, wasn't it? I really thought it was a good idea, but I was wrong. Is that likely to make her come up with more good ideas in the future? Not really. She could have got on the phone to a headhunter and thought to herself, well, there's no point in this because Jim can't get over the fact that I used to be on a level with him and he's going to be horrible to me, so why don't I go and get a job somewhere else? Would have been a very bad idea for the business. This is probably what I would have done under this situation, which was a terrible thing to do, is she could have stayed up all night and written a 40-deck slide with all the evidence of why this was such a good idea, taken it in and tried to present it to Jim the next day. How well would that have gone down? Or what she did do, which was none of those things, is she moaned to her other half about the whole thing. And he just said to her, sounds a bit like Dutch total football from the 1970s. Did you say that to him? And she goes, Dutch whatty from the when? Anyway, it's a famous thing. They had a good run. They won a lot of tournaments. And their secret was that when they were training, they all played in each other's positions, right? And so she goes back in the next day thinking, well, what have I got to lose? And Jim says to her, you haven't come back about that stupid idea, still annoyed about that idea you gave me. And she goes, yeah, it just occurred to me that it was a bit like Dutch total football in the 1970s. And he says, that's a brilliant idea. We will beat everybody. It will give us a huge competitive advantage. How soon can you arrange it? Now, this isn't really about football and not football. It's about speaking their language. It also is in terms of when you're a boss, you know what? The way he behaved towards her was stifling her creativity, and he's very lucky that she didn't go and get a job somewhere else, because that would have been damaging to the company. So both sides of it, but over and above all, and I guess that, this is true of any writing, if you can put something in the language of the reader, if you can put something in the language of the person you're talking to, whether their passion is movies, as it is obviously with Catherine, or football, as it was in the case of Jim, then you have shortcuts winning the argument. Speaking of movies.
This is the Conspiracy of the Sisterhood, which is what we've called a story about two women who used to work together. One of them left to go and work somewhere else, hugely successful, went on and on and on upwards. And the other one stayed behind at the company they'd grown up at. And she had a baby, and then she came back, and her confidence just went... Sue's heard this analogy before, but I have enough trouble remembering my password when I go on a week-long holiday. That's why I've never taken a years-long maternity leave, because I would be physically incapable of operating in an office, and I'd probably just eat biscuits the whole time and watch telly. But so we called it the Conspiracy of the Sisterhood, because what happened was that when the woman who'd had the baby then started talking to her ex-colleague's going, it's great, what you should do is you'd get yourself back out there, network, and then go on some courses, maybe speak on a few platforms, blah, 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 blah. And actually, at that moment, this woman who'd just come back from maternity leave, all she wanted to do was to get through her day, do her job, go home, and kip, probably. And so we turned it into the Conspiracy of the Sisterhood, because it can be a conspiracy, which is that you think that someone's going to help you because they know your background and you've got this whole shared history together. And actually, if they've gone that way and you've gone that way, over there they've got a completely different perspective on what you need to do as opposed to where you need to be. And so what we advise people is to get as a mentor or a sponsor someone you've got no history with whatsoever, because all you do is spend your whole time discussing how crap David's shoes are and why Sophie still can't hold on to a boyfriend, instead of actually kind of moving on and someone giving you dispassionate but yet interested advice about what you want to do. And yet women do have this tendency to fall into the thing of, and I went and talked to so-and-so, and she said he was still really awful, and then we got quite drunk on Pinot Grigio, and then I woke up feeling a bit crap in the morning, and he's still really horrible to me. So it is that kind of whole thing about, and the thing about the sisterhood thing as well is trying to find people who are going to help your people, be they men or women, and it can't be people who are too close to them.
As well as the case studies, we've also mixed in some advice that we've read about or seen elsewhere, some of which very practical. Have you seen the Amy Cuddy TED Talk? This is just one example of that. Should we do it? Should we have a go?
This is very good pre-presenting. Obviously, we didn't do it though. So if you'll stand up.
It's a brilliant talk if you haven't seen it. Stand up. Assume
the position.
Assume the position.
Legs apart.
Superwoman pose.
Hands on hips.
Deep breath. Basically, any situation you go into where you're feeling nervous in advance, what she says, and I think it's true, is that if you assume a confident, powerful position, you will project the hell out of confidence and power. So it's okay, you can all sit down now.
Yeah.
I
hope you're all feeling hugely powerful now.
As well as all those sorts of references,
There's even a music reference. So good.
As well as all those references, as well as all the case studies, really, we wrote this purely and totally out of a conviction that that's enough now. That we don't want... Someone said to me, you've got daughters, so you have 2 lovely daughters. Have you written it so, and Catherine has a lovely daughter and a lovely son, have you written it so that they don't suffer in the workplace? And I said, well, no, not really. It's not about people in my immediate family. It's about every single woman out there that ever has a frustrating moment, ever has a glass wall moment. I mean, I have been lucky to work at Mediacom for a long time. It's a growing business. We have a lot of senior women. I can still be in meetings where I'm the only woman, and I can still be in meetings where suddenly it feels like a glass wall comes down because there's something going on that I just kind of don't quite like. It might be banter, it might be, I don't know, everybody agreeing definitely one way and someone else's voice not being heard. And what I know from being out there in the world, talking to everybody, both Catherine and I, is that, however it is for me at Mediacom, it's much worse out there. I mean, and one example happened actually only a couple of weeks ago when I was talking to someone who'd just taken over a new business, and he was talking about his transformational work at that business. He was the new CEO, whatever, and he was saying, and now he said, I've stopped everybody going to the pub on Friday afternoons. I've got a team now who really care about the work. They don't care about status. They don't care who's in the room, whether it's men or girls. And I said, oh, did you hear what you just said? And he said, oh, I should have said boys and girls, shouldn't I? And I said, well, yeah, you could have said men and women. And obviously there is a limit to this, or maybe there isn't. Maybe we could just start a hashtag glass wall moment there, and it will make British business better.
Thank you very much.